How's everybody doing? Happy Sunday. Let me get the day right. Sometimes I be messing the day. So you see it. We're going to talk about AWS Code Pipeline. I'm a security channel, DevSecOps. Right. So I wouldn't say it's a new topic or anything, but DevOps super hot. Uh, Talking about code environment, spinning it up so it's super quick. The weird thing is I used to do a lot of this manually in the early 2000s. So it's just interesting to see what you can do, with especially with AWS, all the components they got, and to make it, automated. That's where you want to be, so you can throw out more releases. How many releases you got, and continuous delivery and continuous integration. Right, people are companies want to store out more code, which means more more features, more money. All of that. So we're gonna talk about it today. Like I said, I'm trying to get motivated. So, like I said, we'll get to the subject. A long weekend for me, so you see it. AWS is the future. Not just AWS, all the clouds. The cloud is the future. So I just do a little more AWS. So I just thought I would focus on that cloud. So I'm trying to figure out. Let me see if I'm online. My restream says no data. So let's see if I'm getting some data. I think I am. So let's see it. Ooh. Let's see what we got going. Once again, if we got any cybersecurity questions, just throw them in the box and we'll get to them. Let's see. Yep, I'm there. So what's up? Salute to Keep It Techie. You can check him out. I was checking out your security video. That was interesting. That was a great video. Security's all all in there now. When you talk about the web, everybody's getting hacked. Everybody's getting taken out. So let's go and hit that AWS Code Pipeline. Once again, AWS seems like they got a service for for everybody. So they said it's where I currently work. They're kind of really trying to get in. They're doing it the CI/CD with the older packages, and we'll look at some of those on here too. So DevOps, code planning, going to test and build the operations of that. We're going to release, deploy code, operate, and monitor. Then shout out to my man Keep It Tech. We need some security in there. We don't want to be out here getting hacked, because say it's that they hacked their development pipeline and then they got pushed out to a whole bunch of customers. Then we can't get any gas on the East Coast, right? So we gotta get up on our security and make sure that that's happening. So it's always out there. So security is going to be an important part to like go check out Keep It Taking Video. Security is an important part of that, right? So we talked about this. What is DevOps? It's a tactical trifecta that connects the three disciplines. We just kind of saw them on that diagram. Development, security, and operations. The goal is to seamlessly integrate security into your applications, continuous integration, and continuous security, both in pre-production, development, and post-production, which is operations. Let's take a look at that. And deliver better, more. That's the big thing. Secure software. I think we're delivering more software. I just don't think it's more secure. And I think as a nation, right, everybody's getting attacked. Shout out to Tech G. He was on there talking about lights getting cut off, people cutting off the electric grid. All right, so all that's out there for people to attack and to make that happen, right? So that's why we need that DevOps in there. We want to get security into the pipeline as quick as possible. Because if you develop software and get it all built and you try to add security at the end, you always going to be struggling, right? So if you get it when you developing the source, you building, you testing it, getting ready for production. If you get the earlier you get security in there, the better, right? Because then you get your developers on focus, you get your management on focus, right? You get your teams on focus. So the cool thing now, especially with developers, they're really getting on secure coding. Most organizations are pushing that. DevSecOps and DevOps are now adding once again security, and we'll look at a couple of security packages and security scanning tools that are built into AWS. So it makes it easier for you as security operations. I'm a security analyst, right? So I work with our developers. So if I can scan for stuff before we have that conversation, right? Once again, you want to get security in early in the pipeline. Hopefully, in the source when they're developing the code, they're thinking about secure coding, not as the after effect, right? So when you do that too, in the source, your product, is going to be more secure because there's going to be some bugs, some security patches, right? Because we talk security, right? We talking about the whole infrastructure. Here we're trying to get into coding, but you still got to lock down, your Linux boxes, your Unix boxes, your databases. If you run Apache IIS, whatever's serving up your web server. So all that needs to be locked down. If you're in AWS, you're running Lambda, EC2s, API Gateway. They got so many other services and database, RDS, right? So all that needs to be secure, right? But you need to start off with the infrastructure and the code before you get it. So at this picture, a lot of people use GitHub. Like I said, when I was developing, probably 15 years ago, they were using GitHub back then, right? AWS version of that is AWS Code Commit. Jenkins is actually build and test because theoretically you want your test to be automated, right? In the old days when I was developing in 2000, we used to have these huge test cycles. People were manually testing. We were flying people in from out of state to do an integration test, right? So testing now could be automated with a button. Shout out to brother Michael making it. At Kevin Lennox, true. So once again, you want to try to get all this automated, right? Because you want to put out more releases, put out more features, right? The big boys like Facebook, Snapchat, they putting releases out like every day, which was when I was growing up, you probably put a release out every 3 months, right? But cool thing when I was working at DoD, and most of y'all know I worked at DoD, we had 400 programmers, I think, in 5 states or 350. So to get all that code in there and get it tested, get it in production, was especially when you were doing that stuff manually was like I said, a different time and a different era. With this continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? We got AWS Code Commit, AWS Build, and AWS Code Deploy, right? So that's taking to replace the GitHub, Jenkins, and Ansible, right? So you can check your code in, it'll build it, test it, run your whole test suite, and actually deploy it in production or deployed in development for you to do additional tests, right, and additional scanning, right? But you can build something in a day instead of months in a week. I remember when I was at DoD, we worked on an app. I shit you not, for 6 months, we put it in production. We had the first 3 days, we had 1,200 errors. We had 1,200 errors, right? So each team was digging in there trying to figure out what happened. We were getting yelled at, right? Because we were supposed to test it before we actually got it. Really, they were calling it integration development, right? Each team was testing their own area. But when we put that together, right, it was a monster and a mess, right? So these new features, like I said, with code commit, code build, and code deploy, You can test your stuff locally. Have a automated test suite. So what people were typing in the testing, you can actually run that test build in your local app, your local PC before you even get it to test or deploy, right? So that's what the continuous integration and continuous development is, right? So you can figure out what features you want to get in, test them. If certain features aren't ready, you can actually pull those out, send that to production, right, and keep rolling, because features equals more money. Features equals hopefully more views and get more people in there. And once again, right, you got the code commit, code build, and code deploy. That's for GitHub, Jenkins, and Ansible. Shout out to Keep It Tech. I know he did a little Ansible. I haven't done much Ansible from that side effect. So we're gonna just talk about in that pipeline where you got deploy when you check in, and we're gonna talk about pieces of this small, and each one of these probably gonna get a separate video, right? So when you check in your code, right, you're gonna have code analysis. It can scan your code, making sure you found the company's policies, procedures with what you're naming stuff, how big it is, and in there too, you can look for OWASP top 10 stigs or stuff you can scan in that code, but before you even check it in to get it tested, right? Straight up. What's up, Jermaine? Ansible is super cool, right? So once again, they got their version of Ansible, which is code deploy, right? So you can do those builds and those checks in there. Then dependencies, why are you building it? What dependency you got checking? Are those dependencies approved by your agency? I get a lot of developers trying to get these open source code from guys' garages, right? I work at a large state agency. We just can't pull down any code that hasn't been validated, even if it's open source, right? So we got to validate. And while we're testing it, you can do vulnerability scans. We're going to actually look at a couple products that's built in. So when you're actually testing it, it'll scan your code for, once again, those vulnerabilities. And two, when you deploy it, you can do hash verifications, and we'll talk about that. You can sign your code, put it in, that we know it came from somebody in our organization, right? If a hacker comes in and try to sneak code in, if it's not signed, it won't get compiled and put in production, right? So that's some, I wouldn't say new security features, but signing code in the old days was kind of relatively little difficult, right? So then the last part of that is, and I'm gonna switch views, is we got to monitor it. What's in there, monitoring it from a performance perspective and a security perspective, right? There's threat modeling, threat hunting, right? So you could look in there, see if somebody's scanning your site from a foreign nation, or if somebody's in your code doing, they call it TPT, right? Certain techniques used by nation states. It could look in your logs and see if it sees that type of movement, inside your code base and inside your logs, right? That's the cool thing about AWS. You got your cloud watching your cow trails, and they're monitoring everything. Then on top of that, you can get X-ray that monitor how your packages are calling each other, so you can monitor anything. The only, which is not a huge issue, you can log too much and end up paying a lot of money, because logs are space and space is money, right? So, but that's a good thing too. So you just want to know what you get into and what you paid for, right? Let's see what you're making. Would you rather use cloud native tools or AWS tools? I think it's either one. I probably would start off with AWS tools, but sometimes you need to get a certain speed or a certain feature that's only in cloud native. So I would start off with AWS tools. You're using them as supported. A lot of tools, if you're using certain things, is super cheap, right? So I would start off with AWS tools. But if there's a cloud native tooling or feature that brings something that AWS didn't have, I'm cool with that. Because really, the more tools you have, right, the more things you do. But the other part of that is, the more tools you have, the more complex your infrastructure gets, right? I want my infrastructure to be less complex, right? It's easy for me to manage. It's easy for me to build. As an architect, I want to make it simple, easy, right? The thing I know when I'm done architecting is when I look at something and it's simple. I wrote a program that actually went out and it was $1 million grant. I actually went and got some files, brought them back in. They were in XML. I actually inserted them in the database and ran some statistics out, right? The weird thing is if somebody was going to charge the company $250,000, I did it with no lie. I did it with about 15 lines of code inside of an Oracle database, right? And it was simple. Everybody was like, "Is that it?" Yeah, because when you're good at something, it looks simple. People make things look complex because they don't understand it, right? So when you really understand something, you should try to. It should be simple as possible. The older I get, when I was younger, I'd be like, "Oh man, I want to make it look like this Rubik's. I'm gonna go do this and do that." But then when you have to maintain that in production, when you got 4 open source projects and you running a queue and you got it poking here and you pulling it out this and putting it in a database and pushing another, you got to maintain all of that. So people are, and keep it taking notice, people will call you in the middle of the night when production's down. I do not like those calls. So I want something simple, because if it's simple, I can give my night DBAs, my night service people, my junior people, I can give them that design and they should be able to maintain it, right? So that's, for me, that's when I know I'm on top of my game. If I can explain something and they understand it, and it's now with AWS, a lot of that self-monitoring, right? If my Linux box on the EC Tools acting funny, it's getting health checks from my load balancer or my automatic scaling group. AWS will say that Linux distribution is not running right. I'm pinging it. It's not acting right. The CPU's not letting me ramp up. It'll tear it down and spin you up another one, right? So now you should have a self-healing architecture. That's where you really want to get to. Okay, I'm getting all these hits, right? I got Lambda in the queue. Even if I got 1,000,000 hits, 990,000, I'm gonna be in the queue until my application takes them out and insert them in the database, cut a check, whatever we need to do, so my database can handle that scaling, put it in the queue, and on the back end, whatever I got, pulling it out and inserting it where it's to need to go, or sending a flat file. So my architecture should be able to self-heal and self-scale, right? So once you do that, and that's part of the DevOps part of that, right? Can you help the architect, or you the architects, design architect, once again, at a self-scale and self-heal, and you don't have to worry about it, right? It's going to run itself. So what is the code pipeline? AWS Code Pipeline, once again, is continuous integration and continuous delivery for service fast and reliable application and infrastructure. You can use Code Pipeline to fully model and automate your software release project. So once again, this is developers. We're going to check it into the source code. We saw that code commit. You got branching on there, what code's going in what release. Do we need to merge that? And I've actually done a little bit this in real life. You always have an emergency branch. Sometimes there's something happen in the middle of the night and people got to make changes on the fly, right? They don't have time to check it in, right? They're going to make those changes. Then we're going to get them in the code commit repository test after the fact when we do the postmortem. But sometimes I used to pay soldiers, right? So one thing, I'd say this today, you got to pay the war fighter. If you don't pay his wife, he coming home. So I still say this today. So sometimes you got to make sure those pay files get where they need to get people paid, right? So sometimes I've been there with some of the head architects and the CTO, and we writing code on the fly, right? Somebody put something in and it looked good, so we have to flow through a billions lines of code to figure out where people's service was at. That's when you actually cut a lot of checks. 2005. People do pay files, right? Back then we were cutting 300, 400,000 checks, right? So when you moving pay files, I'm making that happen, right? Shout out to Engineering Cannabis. So in the source code, right, you have branches for releases. Once again, you're going to build it. Staging code is deployed and tested. And really, before it goes into production, most sites, unless you're at a high maturity level, people want to have an approval process and click a button before it goes into production. Why? People just want to be ready. They want to, for us, a lot of times we send out emails. We got a new release in production. If something act funny, it's new, let us know, right? But if you're at the top of the line, once again, like Facebook, Meta, I know they're the same company, Snapchat, they're putting out releases twice a day, right? So it's so many releases. So they at a certain maturity level where they don't really worry about that, right? Until then, once you approve it, it goes into production. It gets deployed to production servers. The customers look at it. Hopefully, they just give you ideas and requests. Let me see. But a lot of times there'd be some bugs in there. Let me move my big head. There'd be some bugs in there, right? Then once you take those bugs goes back to the developers, right? Sometimes they're on backlog lists. Sometimes there's new features. Sometimes, hopefully, what they're asking for, we're already having in tests for the next release, right? Because we're trying to be automated, get features in there quick as once again, make it smooth and easy for your developers to get code in production. So what is code commit? So we're going to pick out in the pipeline, there have different codes in there. So we're just going to talk about each one of these at a high level. All right. So you got your developer, you got your code commit, which is your Git repository. They also have AWS CLI, so you can actually do it from the command line. Most people actually do it from a GUI, right? You're going to check it in, create the repository. You see it, clone the repository. You're going to upload, push code, right? So you're checking in the different branches. You you got an emergency branch, right? So when you get your code in there, you get all your developers' code in one central place, right? Because big companies like Meta, they probably got 10,000 programmers around the planet, right? So you get into a couple central repositories for those couple features in those couple nations, states, right? So you want to get those in a central spot. And two, as we talk about, I can scan the code. I can look for WASP top 10, SQL injection, command injection. Do they have validation in their code? Right. So I can scan the code while it's in the repository before it even gets built and put in the test. Right. So that's one thing too, from a security perspective. We want to catch those bugs early and often as possible because when you catch them in source, that's the cheapest place to fix them. Right. Once you get them built and in production, if you got bugs in there, right, they say it's 10,000 times more expensive than if you catch it in source code, right? Why is it more expensive? We got to take it out. We getting errors. We could be sending out wrong bills. So what's up, Sheik? So we want to catch those early, and we'll see a couple products from a security perspective in the pipeline. Right? So AWS Commit is a securely highlevel, scalable source control. It's a private Git repository. It makes it easy for teams to securely collaborate with code, with contribution and encrypted in transit and at rest. So those are the security things of the code commit Git database, right? Any code we send up to it is encrypted in transit. So if somebody's listening, they can't read it, right? And if somebody tries to steal it off the disk, right, it's encrypted at rest. Eliminates the need for you to manage your own source control system or worry about scaling infrastructure. You can use code commit to store anything from code to binaries. It supports the standard functionality of Git and it works seamlessly with your existing Git-based tools. So a lot of people actually run Git on-prem. Then once they get their cycle and get it tested on-prem, they take their repository, clone it up in AWS, then use the AWS Code PipeLine to test it, like we talk about, test it, get it out, and push it in production, which is in AWS. But a lot of times I've seen people run Git on-prem and sync it to AWS, right? So that way you take advantages of both. Let's see. Keep telling what's the high inflation gas? What skills we should so invest now to help with these situations so we can get quick solutions. We won't get quick solutions in microwave. Skills. For me, we talk about it. Engineering academies. You need to get an IT, get you some skills. I think, and I just play the economist. They about to ratchet up the interest rates to get the inflation under control. So you think milk is 10% higher now? Housing gonna be more expensive, so you're gonna have to ratchet up inflation. The interest rates to get inflation underneath control. So me, get your AWS search like me. My inbox is full now. Once again, my contract is winding down at a large state agency, so I've been interviewing at a couple places. I was getting a few hits, but once I got my AWS certs, my hit rate went way up. So get those certs, security, get it security, get with you, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all that's super hot. So that's something you can do. It's not gonna be quick though. You got to put some time in. So once again, we get that code commit. That's your private Git repository up in AWS Cloud. Once again, DevSecOps security. We're talking about that pipeline, how to secure it, and what it should look like. Right. So before you secure something, you got to understand how it works and what it's doing. Right? So that's kind of what we're going over today. So once again, there's developers. You're on your own GitHub, you're in your working directory, staging areas, you're in your repository, you're doing your Git commit in your laptop, getting it ready. And once you get that synced up, your company can run, I'm calling it integration Git up there for all your developers around the nation, around the planet. Now, because right, everybody's working remote, right? So you can have guys working anywhere in the United States, in the world, right? Can get to your AWS code commit, which is your private Git, and put their code up right there. You see version 1, version 2, getting that code up in the commit so we can get it ready to build, deployed, and tested. Right? So that's what we're doing from that continuous integration and continuous delivery. So what features do you get from AWS Code Commit? You collaborate. It's all encrypted, so it's hard for people to steal. Access control, so I can have control of what my junior programmers can do compared to my senior programmers, compared to my release manager, compared to what I'm giving my security team access. Right, so I got different people, different teams in there doing different things. Right, so I can control that access. Highly available and durable, which means AWS is all backed up. They got multiple servers around. So this goes down, it's automatically backed up to another one, right? Unlimited, easy access and integration. You can also add notifications and custom scripts. So if somebody checks something in, you can have an email go to the manager of that team. Somebody builds something and get an error, if it's an OWASP top 10 error, right? And we're going to look at that, scanning the code, scanning the build. You can have an email sent to the security team. They got an OWASP error and it looks funny. So it could go to the security team for review. And two is there are hooks in there. So if you want to, as you check something in, do a custom build or a custom push, or actually just take their code and copy it to another repository. Why would you take their code and copy it to another repository? You can have a rogue developer, which is rare. That's a senior guy. They have delete options, right? So somebody could come in, you trust them, right? So you got to be careful who you trust. They could go in there and delete everything. So a lot of times you want to have a backup of that, or a lot of people just take their code and just copy it to another repository on the back end. Especially shout out to engineering cannabis. If you got this $1 million idea, you want to make sure that code is protected. And a lot of people don't realize, even though you're a developer, it's not your code. The company paid for that, right? So you want to make sure you think of everything. If you have a rogue programmer, or you can have a nation state. Cassette got in, I think, and slipped in some code in there. What if a nation state went in there and put ransomware in there and just start encrypting all your code? You got a backup it up somewhere? Can you get to an older version of that so you can get to the code before they encrypt it? Right, so those are all the things from continuous integration and continuous development that we need to think about, right? So we on that next higher level, getting that next pay. So those are some things you need to think about, especially as a security, right? We always thinking of that rogue person, that nation state, or what happens if we get ransomware on that? Where are we going to get the? Because most people don't do backup tapes, right? I'm old. I remember backup tapes. So if you're copying it, and you're copying it to another AWS region, if the ransomware is on there, you're going to copy that ransomware to the region where you got your backup, right? So both of those sites are going to be encrypted. So you got to think about how do you handle that if you get ransomware on there? Because if you copy it to your backup place and it's all electronic, it's all going to be encrypted, right? And you're going to have to pay up on the money. So once again, it's just showing AWS IAM, identity and access management. From the code commit, I can get my developers different access rights. Then I can get my security. See, I got AWS code commit power users. Then I got a different set there. This set of developers, they can't make changes. The master branches, the branch going to production, they can do everything but the master branch, right? My senior developers, they're going to make sure, they're going to review those code changes, make sure they feel good about them, and they're going to merge them on a master branch that's going to get pushed out in production, right? So just letting you know, we're going to have different teams, different skill set, right? And different people, right? Developers, senior, you're going to have your DevOps guys that's going to actually, get it ready for production. The two is the closer you get production, you want less people in your production environment, right? Just because you're a developer, you do all that in development. When we go to production, I don't need a lot of developers in production. I get a lot of arguments with that with my development team. That's why we have development, right? When my developers get in production, right, that's a security risk. Most people think, oh, you don't trust me. It's not about trust, right? This is business, right? So you want to make sure you have less people getting in production, right? That's when your DevOps people going to get in there. Shout out to Keep It Techie. I'm gonna have a couple SAs in there, system administrators, a couple DBAs in there. But remember, we on AWS. All that should be built with automation, so I shouldn't have a lot of need for my even senior guys in there. Once again, if my EC2 Linux is acting funny, I'm just going to tear it down and spin up, right? Once my database gets built, right? Once you make those schema changes or DynamoDB changes, right? There should not be a lot of need in there. That's the thing AWS is selling you is you worry about your code. We're going to worry about the infrastructure, right? They're going to manage your Amazon RDS or your DynamoDB or even your Oracle RDS. AWS is going to manage that, right? So you're just going to be building tables, creating it. So there should not be a lot of need for a lot of people to be in those services. So the build. So the build is we got all our code in there right now. We need to compile it. I'm a Java guy. You compile it into a WAR file, zip file, or a jar file so it actually run in production, right? If you're IIS, you compile it and build it. I don't even know what PHP does, right? PHP. I think you put it in there. I think it's interpreted in the Apache build. I need to look that up. So we're building it. Once again, we got the developers down there. We're pushing code. We got stuff running there, get results back. Everything looks good. Now we're going to build it into the environment, right? We got our build spec in YAML. So now we take all our web pages, our Java code, our CSS files to make the code pretty, right? We got to package all that up to put that in production so it'll run as a cohesive code, right? This developer down here, he might just be a UIX guy. He's just doing CSXs, making the pages look good, round and stuff. He might not even be looking at real code, right? So, but once again, we got to take that whole project and build it. And of course, the next step going to be putting in production, but building it, make sure it's run, spinning up some tests, making sure, once again, I'm a job, making sure the WAR file is built properly. So when we push it out, it's gonna run, right? Once again, all this is automated, right? Once you put the code in, you click the button, it's going to build your package, run your test, and this thing's going to give you a deployable package, right? So you can deploy it once again to Java, IIS, PHP, whatever that package is, you're going to get it deployed into the environment. So build is a fully managed continuous integration service that compiles source code, runs results, produce software packages that are ready to deploy. With Code Build, you don't need to provision, manage, or scale your own servers. Code Build scales continuously and process multiple builds concurrently. So your builds are not left waiting in a queue. You can get started quickly by using pre-packaged build environments so you can create custom build environments that use your own build tools with code builds, and you are charged by the minutes for the compute use for your use, right? So when I put it in code build and it spins up and starts testing it, Oracle owns the servers for that. So I don't have to build them. I don't have to manage them. I don't have to care and feed them, right? We always talk about pets versus farm animals, right? That's one of the things, right? You care for pets, right? You don't care for farm animals, right? Depending on what you are, if you're not vegan, you eat those, right? So you don't want your programs to become pets. That means you gotta baby them, take them. I used to have a Great Dane I love. I spent $1,000 on dog needs, right? You want to leave that to AWS to manage and care for that, right? So you just using them, right? So that's where they're coming from with that. So once again, it's secure. Build your artifacts are encrypted with customer-specific keys. You can build code builders integrated with IAM. We talked about that, so you can assign user-specific permissions to your build project. So we had AIM permissions for developers. You're gonna save that same thing for build professionals, right? So I might have somebody specializing in war files, Java, PHP, right? So I only want them to be able to get to certain sections of this build file. Right. Two is we can use customer specific keys, meaning we could be developing for customers, right? So we have their customer specific keys. So when we push it into their AWS environment, because they paid for us, right? We have their keys and they know we the ones that developed it to push it in their environment. Once again, identity access management, IAM. You want to give certain people certain rights, even to your build, right? Because now you got your package. The cool thing about that is most of that should be automated. So the people that really have access to that should be super small and super tiny, right? Once again, we're talking about CI, continuous integration and continuous delivery. Just another part of IT. And from a cybersecurity perspective, what does it actually look like? Now we're talking about deploying it into the environment. So up here was the code commit. We got developers, we got senior developers, we got project managers, we got testers looking in code. We build the environment with our code build up here. We went from code commit to code build. Now we got to build. Once again, I'm a Java guy. We got our war file. We need to deploy it, right? That right there's a picture of an EC2, but it could be EC2. Shout out to AWS. They're real big on Docker. That's the thing I need to get into. That's hot from a security perspective. A lot of people spend it out on Docker. So whatever that is, it could be EC2, it could be Docker, it could be Kubernetes. Part of that's going to be what database it is, because you're going to need to change your schema for your new requirements. It could be DynamoDB, Oracle, MySQL, right? So that deployment package is going to be a myriad of things. It's going to be your CSS files to make sure your web pages look good, but it's going to be a package and it's going to get deployed not in one place, but in many places. So, is there a place you use to lab all this? Yeah, the place I lab is AWS, and we're going to actually start labbing a little more. What you can do, there's a free tier, and I'm actually do a video about that, Jermaine. But if you look, there's a free tier, and anything, especially for the first year, they charge me a little bit. I need to get a new email address, but now they have free tiers on 99% of their services. So I've spun up. I haven't quite done a pipeline, but at the end, I've have a production architecture I spin up. I got a 3 tier. I'm using a load balancer. I'm using a PostgreSQL database. So all of that for me is still super cheap. I think I'll pay $1.50 a day for mine. But no, Jermaine, but just go out there and I might at the end of that, I'll bring up AWS's web site and we can look at some of the free tier services. But yeah, I lab every day. When I lab actually on AWS and their free tier. Don't tell anybody. I actually ran a business. A friend of mine is an attorney. She was actually on here. She actually had a compliance business where they went out. If you remember winterization, it was under the Obama thing. They gave winterization a ton of money. Long story short, Indiana got crazy amount of money. So they needed to go out and audit those companies to make sure they weren't stealing the money. So I actually wrote a Java application that actually wrote into a small Oracle database so they can actually do all their compliance stuff. We did a checklist, you checking their paperwork, you checking some stuff. They had these things you have to do to the billing. So it was just a checklist, but it compiled all the information on there. So I actually ran that for a year and a half on the free tier. Their free tier is powerful, but Jermaine, you will definitely look at that. Yeah, I lab every day on AWS. I usually try to have a production project I'm working on to work on my skills. Currently, right now, I'm working on it's called an S3 bucket. I'm actually doing it like that. It's an audit firm, and in the audit firm, you got an internal and external audit firm. So I'm creating it so that the auditors can only see their folders for their stuff. Then if you're a supervisor on that team, you can see everybody underneath your team. Then on top of that, if you coming from security, we're going to give you a read-only role. It's called assuming a role. That's one thing called an IAM role. I know I'm kind of it. So you're going to assume this IAM role of security. And I can say you get 2 days to use this role. Then this role is going to disappear. Why? You don't want people to have long-term credentials, because if they get hacked, whatever they have credentials to, the hacker can. So I'm working on giving people temporary credentials. It's a new thing called IAM role on AWS. But now, Jermaine, but yeah, we definitely pick at it, and I'm gonna start showing some of that stuff. Because for me, unless you're doing it, you're not really learning it. Talking about it's cool. Pontificating about it's cool. I taught colleges for 10 years at a community college, so I could pontificate with the best of them. But my thing is, you got to roll your sleeves up and get dirty. You got to get in the console and click on some stuff. Shout out to 10. And once you get the console, we got to get the cloud formation and be able to do everything from the command line with automation, right? So those are things you want to get to, Jermaine. And that's one thing on this channel. We're gonna start. Shout out to Dwayne Lightfoot. We're gonna start labbing. Well, I'm labbing every day. I need to start showing it on my channel. So we're gonna make that happen, Jermaine. So I'm about to find a way to become a mentee because I've been waiting to get code underneath my belt. We can make that happen, man. We can make that happen. Like I said, I keep saying this. I definitely want to at least start doing Java code and PHP because we're part of it. And shout out to Engineering Cannabis and shout out to Keep It Techie. They know that when you put stuff in production and it doesn't work, that's when you learn. That's when you make your money. I always laugh at my boss. I always laugh. I said, dude, I don't make my money till stuff go left, right? Because if everything's going to run smooth, you don't need me, right? If everything runs according to plan, you don't need a PBO. I make my money when stuff go left. Right, my boss laughed. He goes, my boss calls me at 10 o'clock at night or 11 or 6 a.m., right? Because I make my money when stuff goes left, right? So, and that's when you learn that stuff, when you code. And like I said, I did Java for 10 years. Before that, I did Oracle Forms and Reports. It was web pages that was done actually in, I'm trying to think of the term, when web pages was old. So then after that, I did Java with PL SQL and Oracle. Right. Then before that, I was doing core and shell because we were on Unix. So I've been programming off and on for 20 years. Right. My program of choice, and I need to upgrade that, is Java because I've done Java, like I said, for 10 years. Long story short, Oracle killed their development environment because Java was so hot. So they said they want you to use Java. They created something called JDeveloper that worked well with Oracle, but it actually generated Java code. So yeah, I've been programming for a long time, Jermaine, off and on. So, but that's where you get PSTD because I've been yelled at by a 2-star general, not me personally, but the project failed, and I think we were struggling at DoD. So you got to be on top of your game. So once again, check your code in. We're gonna automatically build it, and we're gonna look at it coming up. Run your test scripts, run your compliance scripts, scan your code, figure out what issues we have, then hopefully get those fixed before we deploy it and go in production. But this is realistic, and a lot of people don't understand this. I've been on stuff where all the bugs were low-level bugs or cosmetics bugs or wouldn't be security bugs. So they say put that in the backlog. If you do agile, that's one of their terms. We're going to put it in the backlog and fix that later. We need to get this out to production. Number one, it's new features. We were paying people. It could have been check reconciliation back then. So some of those features need to go unless there's a really good reason. Then we knew in 2 weeks later, we're going to have 100 small bugs we need to figure out, right? So we told the users, if you get this is a workaround for the bugs, but we're going to have that bug fixed in 2 weeks, right? So a lot of times from a business perspective, you will send stuff out there that has bugs in it, right? So it's part of the game. So AWS Code Deploy, right? Deploying it into production, testing, different regions, right? It's a fully managed deployment service that automates software deployment to a variety of compute services, such as EC2. AWS Fargate is actually their version of Docker that they fully manage. AWS Lambda, and the cool part is they manage your stuff on your own premise, right? A lot of that stuff is done by agents. So if you got agents on a machine, you can deploy them anywhere, even to your own premise. You're even to your own premise server. So a lot of people miss that part, right? Um, so Fargate on-prem code deploy makes it easy for you to rapidly release new features, help you avoid downtime during your application deployment, handles the complexity of updating your application. You can use AWS Code Deploy to automate your software deployments, eliminating the need for error-prone manual operation. The service scales to match your deployment, right? So hopefully it's automated. You won't forget stuff. Like I remember years ago, I put some Oracle code in there and I forgot it was a spec file, right? So in Oracle, it's called a spec file. For some reason, I forgot the spec file. So it took me a minute to figure out why I wasn't in production because we did this manually, right? I was actually on a team called a generation team, and we had to manually compile everything, take your CSS, get it ready, put it in production because it was client server. So we actually had to compress it, send it out to 1,000 machines with a push, right, from operations to get it on these people's machines so it actually run the client part, right? That should be client server. That's why it wasn't cool or nice because client server is cool till you got to push it out to 1,000 machines. Like I used to work at a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. So you trying to do these pushes to small countries on the other side of the world, right? Because it used to be a Lily Brazil, right? I'm talking about the Brazil country, right? Where we have apps running. So we had to manually compile it, get with it. So when you do your login screen as part of your login script, it will push our app down to your machine, right? So that's when you do it manually. So this is much more elegant, much more less error prone, right? Because once you get it down, right, you would get it right. So that's it. So let's see what my man. The chat prompt is still up. We can't. Oh, you can't see me. Oh, that's cool. My bad. I don't need to be seen. I'm just playing. So yeah. So like the cool thing for me is I used to do a lot of this stuff manually. So to see the future and it done without automation, right, is just it's intriguing to me, right? And so, like I said, I used to work on a generation team. People checked out our code. They used to call Oracle Designer. It's their Oracle's version of their Git that was 20 years ago. All the developers put all their code in Oracle Designer, put their Oracle Forms of report, and we had to manually compile them. The two is you got to manually compile your tables for your create updates, your foreign keys. You got to manually get that ready to build in production. Man, it used to take us 48 hours of the weekend to get it in production and get it ready to get pushed out. Now you're talking about doing that stuff in 15 minutes or less before people even know. The reason it took so long is it would be like 3 or 6 months worth of development, right? Because it wasn't continuous, right? That's when they call the old school waterfall, right? You got all your requirements, you build it all at one time, and you deployed it all at one time, right? Everybody's agile, right? You take a few requirements, you get them in there, and you get them in as quick as possible. Then you used to figure out what's wrong with them. I worked on some software we worked on for a year before we pushed it out. Right, so that's old school. That's waterfall, right? That's why they came out with agile because there's a lot of negative things when you develop something for a year. Requirements are changing, times is changing, stuff's becoming obsolete. Why are you still working on that, right? So that's how old I am. I was doing a waterfall, right? So here's a picture that once again the developers over there checking into your Git. CloudWatch is getting those specs, right? Once again, over here is your source code, your build, your deploy. Then over here, you can have two production regions with different code, and they're doing different things, right? And so there's your deploy unicorn and your deploy gnome. Right, to these people, which is the future, is these people could be in any state, any country, right? Once they're uh, checking into the Git and merging into the right branch, right? We off building, scanning the source and deploying it to where it needs to go, right? So we don't need everybody in the same room, right? In the same thing. A lot of people believe there's synergies in that. A lot of big open source products, they're spread out around the world. I use Spring, which is a huge open source. Hibernate, which is another Java open source. Those guys are spread out around the world, right? So when they check their stuff in there, get and build it, right? It's local. Now though, you got Teams and Zoom meetings, so it makes it a lot easier to do when people are in different states and different part of the country, right? So once again, that's kind of what it's going to look like. That's it again. We looked at it: code, build it, deployment group, the package, and where we're going to build it, right? Push, build, deploy the package, deploy. The results are: were there any bugs in it? Is anybody complaining? Did it scale right? Sometimes we test stuff in a smaller environment, but if it scales up to 1,000 VMs you're trying to run, right? Sometimes when you scale it, you start having problems. So that's what those results are coming from. All those, the build and the package. Some of those are build errors, and some of those are production errors. Right? Stuff we're going to put in the backlog probably and fix later. And we're going to talk about this in depth, not today, but in the code, we can do a code analysis, dependency, vulnerability scanning, hashing, make sure it's us, right? We're using signer keys before we. Then we talked about it. A lot of stuff should be automated, and part of that automation is you're running automated tests against your code base to make sure there's no errors in there. One of the tools we're going to talk about AWS Code Guru detects security vulnerabilities and does automated code review, right? Security vulnerabilities and automated code reviews. It's going to look through your code and look for stuff that you should have caught or you shouldn't be in there. The cool thing though is hopefully we're going to have it running in their local machine. So they're going to fix it. They're going to handle the errors. We don't need to tell everybody, right? So we have that running. We're going to look at it. Code Guru developer tool that provides intelligent recommendations to improve code quality and identify applications' most expensive lines of code. Integrates Code Guru into your existing software development workflow to automate code reviews during application development. Continuously monitor application performance and production and provides recommendation and visual clues on how to improve your code quality, application performance, and reduce overall costs, right? So that's one thing we want to do and we want to make happen, right? And those are some things too. In the old days, you should just have to learn this by on-the-job training or going to courses. Now you have software that's going to give you recommendations, give you things to look at, and to improve your software. And two is you can pick certain things you're looking for in Code Guru to make sure you're following the company's policies and procedures, right? The code reviewer uses machine learning. Shout out to Engineering Cannabis. Code review uses machine learning and automated reasoning to identify critical issues, security vulnerabilities, and hard to find bugs during application development, and provides recommendation to improve code quality. They also have another module called Code Profiler, helps you developers find the application most expensive lines to help them understand the runtime behavior of the application, identifying and removing inefficiencies, improving performance, and significantly decrease compute costs. Right? So somebody's keep opening and closing a connection to a database instead of reusing and open connections. Those are super expensive, right? Every time I open up a database connection, that's probably 2 or 3 seconds. If I open a connection, then in my code, I just keep reusing that open connection. Then after I go through the whole process of a batch file, I close it at the end, right? You could save at least 4 or 5 factors to the speed of the code of your code running, right? And so those modules is what you need in there to make sure the organization has some standards on the coding. And once again, the longer it runs on AWS, the more it costs you, right? So you want to find those things up front because they're going to save you money. I appreciate you, Kev Tech. Stop by real quick to say salute. Get yourself. I appreciate you, Kev Tech. I would tell everybody to go join the Kev Tech, but I get most of my subscribers from Kev Tech. Shout out to Kev Tech. But I always send a lot of people when people ask me, especially if you just getting into the game, and especially if you're a little younger, even for old people. I started on the help desk, right? I did it. Of course, I was doing the Oracle help desk, right? For when we looked out there for when something went left. But even as a junior programmer, they get help desk tickets, right? If there's something wrong with the database or something wrong with the application, and somebody says coming from the database, the junior programmer who's on that project gets those tickets from the help desk, right? So to me, I started out on the help desk, right? I get those tickets, and like we talked about, is the SQL good or is it not using the index? Like I said, when we did an automated build, did we step on some indexes and now it's scanning the whole table? We'll talk about that later. Once again, I've been programming 30 for years, and one of my especially is optimization of large databases, right? Because the way you write a select could take some, like from 4 hours to 30 days, right? Depending on how you're doing your application, how you're using your indexes, what are you using, what techniques are you using, right? So once again, I always send because help desk is, especially if you get in the game, especially with very little IT experience, that's where you want to be. Put your time in there. And he always talks about, and I need to work on that because I'm old and grumpy, working on soft skills, and you get those soft skills working with customers. Right? The crazy thing now is, and I'm gonna have on my channel, I talked to the chief security information officer, the CIO, and even the president of the company. So you got to have great soft skills because you can't snap at those guys, even if they're doing something weird. Like, why would you do that? You got to remain you're cool. They sign the checks. Let's get it right. So now, shout out to Kev Tech, doing great work over there. He always sends me a few people. So anybody he sends me, I'm going to help him, because I know he's over there, doing great things. Does Code Guru link to Visual Studio or is this during the Git commit? I need to check on that, Jermaine. It might lit. I need to look at that. Currently, the way I would have it run, when you check your code in, because I'm going to have a developer branch, right? So each developer, so as soon as you check it into your developer branch, I would scan your code, Google code there. But that's a good question, man. I need to check on that. Like I said, I always think from a large architect, when you check your code in there, it would run it, right? Because the way I usually do it is each developer has a code branch, and in their code branch, whatever they're working on, right, their code will go there so they can check it in. I'm going to have a EC2 kind of set up the way production set up so they can run their internal tests to make sure their stuff working before they check it into a release branch with all the other developers, right? So they're still going to have their contained environment. But yeah, I need to look into that. So that's how I would do it. They're going to have their development branch, clicking in your development branch, right? Whatever you're working on. So you get your code review there, other stuff, SSM, which is a manager service ran by AWS. It's some other manager thing that's going to run code in there. Tools, I do compliance. So they got detective, because it's going to tell you if we're doing DoD work, HIPAA work, it's going to stand that for compliance to give you those readings. So we're going to have a couple things scanning there, Jermaine. But I need to check on that. That's an excellent question. Once again, Code Guru, write and review the code built in. So that shows you the parts where they're checking. Right, code reviewers, where you write your code. Once you build it, you got the code profiler. Then once again, when you check it in and deploy it, you're going to have a code profiler, right? So here, like we talked about, expensive lines of code, figure out what's going on. Are you closing and opening up your database connections? Are you using indexes? Are you using a word clause where you should instead of scanning the whole table, right? So you'll get those. Then here, when you get it kind of in, we always call it enterprise test, EIT, enterprise integration test, right? We're going to run it on the whole code base over here, right? We're going to deploy. First deploy course is not going to be in production. We're going to have an enterprise integration test. Sorry, I need to work on those acronyms. We used to have EIT, EAT, right? Accepted test and integration test, right? So too many acronyms. I've been in government work too long, right? So we have different branches for those different before we get in production, right? Because each one of those are going to have just you, just your team, or like I said, I used to work with hundreds of developers in 4 or 5 states, right? So that will be an enterprise test because a lot of times some other guy can break your code, right? A lot of times we have specs, so this other team's gonna call your spec, right? I did a accounting program, so accounts payable was counted accounts receivables, and they changed the indicator and it broke all accounts receivables because they needed that indicator to be a certain way, right? So when we do our integration enterprise test, right, we're going to want to go the profiler on that too. Right? So some high levels of what Code Guru does. It does security detection. It reviews and improves codes, like we talked about. OWASP Top 10. If you Google that, and I did a couple of videos, they do application security. So they always give you the top 10 vulnerabilities caused by bad coding. Uh, like AWS internal security best practices. AWS has theirs. Uh, it also detects security in Java 8 through Java 11, Python. You can use it to detect security issues and the following, right? So it does Python, Java, PHP, right? So they give you best practices from a security standpoint on that, right? So real quick, OWASP Top 10. API security is a big thing now, right? Because everybody usually calls everybody with API. So it does AWS API security, security best practice. If you do AWS crypto, that is cryptography, not the money. So their standards are using it, right? And two, the Java crypto library, are using those correctly. Python crypto library are using those correctly. If you're doing LDAP, lightweight directory access, if you're not using Active Directory, Unix has something called LDAP, so it checks security there. Sensitive information links checks for personal or sensitive information. It checks if you got passwords or access keys stored in your program, which is a no-no. So it's going to look for that. Input validations checks for malform or malicious data for untrusted sources. Log injections going to look for log4j. That's what the Apache log4j was the last big security hole that was affecting the United States. So it's going to look for that. So Code Guru is going to do a lot of good things for you, right? And it seems super cheap. I think it was charging you like $10 for 10 million lines of code. I mean, we can look at it. It was super cheap. I was surprised. So that shows you Code Guru. We pushing the code. Those were the branches we talked about: developer main and one for the programmer. Right. So then as soon as we do that, we're going to pull and request notification to the Code Guru service. So as soon as you check it in, it's going to scan your code on those branches. It's going to give you actionable items, which are things to fix. It's going to give you visualization, what things are calling what and what problems are you having. Then, like we talked about, you're going to merge it into your code build and your code deploy. Then over there, I'll cut that off. It's going to looking to production, and there's looking for the performance monitoring, right? What's the most of this thing's going to be expensive to call? Are you calling your Lambda right? Are you calling your SQL statement right? It's going to give you a performance monitoring, right? Even if your code is correct, it could be running too slow to be used in production, right? So Code Guru is going to give you metrics on all of that. Right? So from a cybersecurity, we want availability. Three is you know, AIC, CIA, right? So you want availability is the A, right? So integrity, right? So and availability. So it's going to give you those. Then once again, your code pipeline, we looked at that. We got our Scout and our Sonar Cube, our OWASP. Now we got our code deploy in there. Let me roll back up to there. We got our Code Guru in there. We got our Sonics Cube in there. We got our dependency in there. We got our OWASP Dash in there. So we got two OWASP checking apps, right? Dynamic. So we're building our infrastructure right out there with security in mind, so we can catch performance, we can catch bugs, we can catch things before it gets in production. The earlier we can capture, the cheaper it is. Never know about this. It's there's a lot of different tools. Like we said last week, we talked about it's similar to the Sonar Cube or the dependency checking. AWS just seems if they like something, they're gonna buy it and they're gonna make a service of it. And the cool thing is when they do it, they make it easier to use inside their infrastructure. So there's a lot of code dependency check. And if you look at find bugs and PMD, those were open source things that I was using in Java 10 years ago, right? They're not as good as what people have now, but those checks have been out there for, like I said, forever. I use find bugs at PMD when in the Java world, oh my God, 15 years ago, right? The last part we're going to touch on that is production, right? When you deploy it into production, there's another product called Elastic Beanstalk. It's easy to use for deploying and scaling applications and deploy them in Java, right? So now we took it through the pipeline. The pipeline is going to give it to Beanstalk, and Beanstalk is going to deploy it in production into a production quality setup. What we were looking at in the pipeline is test, QA, right? Getting it ready. It's going to pass that off to Beanstalk, and Beanstalk is going to put it in production. So Beanstalk is an easy use service for Java, .NET, PHP, Node, Python, Ruby, Go, Docker, right? On familiar services such as Apache, Nginx, Passenger, and IIS, right? So you can simply upload your code to Elastic Beanstalk, automatically handles deployment, capacity provisioning, load balancing, auto scaling. At the same time, you retain full control over AWS resource prior in your application and can access the underlying resource. There's no additional charge for Elastic Beanstalk. They just charge you for the resources you spin up. So when you put it up, you can say spin up 8 EC2 Linux servers, right? Put Apache on each one of those. So you're going to get charged for Apache. You're going to get charged for the EC2 instance. You're going to get charged if you put a block storage on there that's bigger, right? If you spin up a S3 bucket, right? So it's going to charge you for the resource, but it's going to make it easier for you to deploy them. So now I leveled this what it looks like on Beanstalk. So you put your code, and AWS is going to handle your HTTP server, your application server, your language interpreter, your operating system, and host. So you handle the little green blue dot, and AWS handles the rest of that. Right? So Elastic Beanstalk can configure each EC2 instance in your environment with components necessary for your application for your selected platform. No more worrying about logging into instances to install and configure your application, right? So in the old days, we had to do that by hand, right? So Amazon's going to spin all that infrastructure on you, and you just need to put your code when you upload, and it's going to run all that for you, right? So that's the beauty of it, right? So I always tell people, I don't think you're going to need as many essays, DBAs, right? Those jobs are going to switch over to DevOps, SecOps, release management, right? Or you're going to do the infrastructure, right? But you're just going to do the template of the infrastructure. Then it's going to spin it up automatically what you told it to spin up. I need an EC2. I need it to be large. I need it to be compute intensive, and they actually have a network-based burst mode to speed up your networking, right? So you give it a template, then AWS does spin it up and manage it for you. The only thing you need to do is worry about your code. So in the old days, we used to be like 10 of us just doing DBA work, right? Helping the teams and spinning up Oracle instances and spinning up Unix boxes and configuring networking, right? AWS is going to do a lot of that for you, right? So those certain jobs are going to disappear, but they're going to be created as something else, right? So just going to be different jobs, right? People say, well, don't that mean less? I think you would need less security people, but we're already half a million people short, right? Or 700,000, right? So I think those are just morphing into different, like I said, security jobs, different networking jobs, right? So I don't deal with the network. The networking I deal with is AWS and configuring my region and how I'm going to connect to my office, my on-prem versus my cloud, right? So it's going to be a little different. Once again, that's our pipeline going over to Elastic Beanstalk. This is going to spin up what we need in production, right? So this is our build, right? This is our developer, right? This is our pipeline. This is our continuous integration and continuous development, right? And once you deploy it, right, now we're talking about our infrastructure, guys, how you spin it up, how you do a 3-tier, how you connecting to the database, what type of database, right? All that's production stuff, right? And this is what we're going to talk about later. So, but the default Elastic Beanstalk not quite secure. So, what are the following security issues of that in Figure 1? Deploying EC2 and RDS instances from the web and a database layer need to be in a private subnet. So we're going to dig in that. See that private subnet? When Elastic Beanstalk does it, it's all in the public subnet, which is not as secure. You need to encrypt your logging in your S3 bucket, right? S3 bucket is kind of your file system where you keep files. Encrypting your RDS instance in your standby replica, right? Encrypting your data in transit by using HTTPS protocol. So this is a less Elastic Beanstalk. You see that in the blue, but there was a lot of configuring to get it secure. So when you need to secure it, what things do you need to do in Elastic Beanstalk to make it secure? Once again, I do compliance work and government work, right? So that's going to be HIPAA, FERPA, DOD, FISMA, right? So there's certain things that you need to be encrypted at rest, encrypted in transit, right? That's not in the default setup for Elastic Beanstalk. We're going to need to configure that, right? But once we configure it once, give it the template. Shout out to Tam. We're going to give it the cloud formation template, right? Then that's going to tell Elastic Beanstalk to build it like this each time. We don't have to manually do it. When we need it to build, cloud formation is going to build it how we need it built, right? So that's the beauty of that. So I put the link in there if somebody want to come up. Like I said, we route. That's it. So yeah, so that was it. I just want to talk about code pipeline, and a lot of times too is that's where security makes it money. Elastic Beanstalk is definitely a cool service. Definitely makes it a lot easier, but it's not at the level of security you need, especially for a large company. For me, even a small company. But so, what do you need to do as a security personnel to get that to a certain level? That's how you scouts get the bag, get the money. Those are the skills that you bring in and say, hey, you're using Elastic Beanstalk, but you need these 10 steps over here to make sure it's locked down. A lot of people don't even know that, right? Oh, you using Elastic Beanstalk? Oh, that's cool, but there's a lot of things that that's not secure, right? Like I said, the locks, the HTTPS, where you spin up the EC2 instance. See, that says private. They want to put it in public. If it's public with public addresses, that means people from the internet can ping them, right? If they do a route, they probably see them in the route, right? If they do an nmap, right, that stuff could probably come up, right? So you want to make sure you're in a private subnet. So when you get to the application load balancer, when you scan from the outside through the internet, you're not going to see all the EC2 instances. Now you're going to see your application load balancer. That's going to ping out, right? But the rest of your 100 EC2 instances that you got in 2 different data centers, they won't be able to see those, right? If you can't see them, that makes them a lot harder to hack, right? So to hack, they got to get on our network. The tool, a lot of times, I always ask a lot of my clients and small companies is that a service that you need to really be open to the internet? A lot of that stuff is just usually for company use, but because they in AWS, they think they should have it on the internet. I'm like, no, take the internet gateway alone. You can use the NAT gateway, set up a private VPN, and then you could have all that traffic go through your corporate data center. You control all that traffic with VPN. Then on top of that is if it's super secure and it's on my own VPN, I can have them MFA, right? So I make you use VPN and I'm gonna make you MFA, right? So now my risk has went way down. It's not on the internet, and I've got 2 extra layers of security before you even get in there, right? So those are things we're gonna start talking about. And like I said, I'm gonna grow y'all into that. I know some people are probably beginners, intermediate, so we're gonna talk about those at different levels and what does that mean. And at the base level, everything should be encrypted at rest, encrypted at transit, then build into that. So now we can start talking about a 3-tier architectural network, public subnets, private subnets. And if you're in a government space, the hot thing is zero trust, right? Is this zero trust? Are we controlling network traffic east and west, right? So there's a lot of things built into that. So we're going to get you the basics so you can start having those advanced security conversations. So how much network you need to know to what's on the screen right now? Minor, right? Not a lot. Because my network is a lot better, but when you work for a big company, I got a network team, right? So I need to understand from theoretical stand, right? So I know our public network should only thing be access to the internet. I know my private application layer and my private database should not be reached from the internet, right? So I very little, to be honest, Jermaine. If you have basic fundamentals, now when we start, shout out to JB, he's a network guy. Now when you start talking about cider blocks and your cider range and you routing from your open to that, when you actually setting up the route table, so only the web server and the public can talk to the app server, and only the app server can talk to the database, and the web server can't talk to the app server. You got to set up the routes. I could do it, Jermaine, but you don't need to know that. What I tell them is my top green shouldn't talk to my bottom blue. Yeah, right. From a security perspective, right? And I expect my networking team to make that happen. Right? Then we can use Code Guru, and it's called X-Ray. We'll talk about it. I put X-Ray in my public subnet, and I should not be able to ping my database subnet, right? So the only thing, as long as I knew ping or nmap, when I start doing it, I should not see any subnets from my database subnet, right? So you need to just understand, communications and route traffic. But I can, but most you don't need to know how to route it up and figure out your cider block. Nah, man, you got a whole networking team to do that. But so now, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, I do a lot of compliance and assurance. So I just talk about segments at a high level. I've learned a lot. Yeah, I think if you have segments from a cyber guy, that's what you really need to know. This web segment shouldn't talk to the database segment, right? And I mean, you understand networking at a high level, right? If this is 192.168.1.0 and this is 196.168.2, right? These are two different subnets, right? And this subnet shouldn't be able to talk to that subnet. So if you had subnets, I think you probably right where most security people are at, to be honest. And so yeah, so now you don't have to be super in depth. Like I said, I've been an architect, so that's why I kind of know that. But from a regular cybersecurity person, you don't need to know cider blocks. As long as you understand segments and what segments should talk, and database segments, and what's on the internet and what's not, and the routes. A lot of times when you look at X-Ray is going to show you the routes, right? So because a lot of times I thought my network team set up a certain route, but when I actually did an nmap or looked at the routes were off, meaning it was going. I was at a thing is somebody accidentally took a route and it actually went out on the internet and came back into the company. I'm like, why is this route coming from? It looks like it's coming out on the internet. Somebody misconfigured the routes. The crazy thing is the app worked, but the traffic was going out back on the internet. Because a lot of times, especially with AWS, a lot of their services actually on the internet, you actually have to bind them to your VPC, which is this, and bind them to a certain subnet so they won't go outside on the internet. They stay inside of your VPC. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. That's an advanced technique. How do you take Lambda and put it in your private subnet, your VPC? How do you actually take DynamoDB, which is you can get from internet, once again bind it to a private subnet. You can actually put a security group is a AWS virtual firewall. Put a security group around it so only your subnet could talk to your Lambda database, right? Because really, when you're using Lambda, you're actually taking a schema or a virtual slice of it. It's really one big database. You're just getting a slice of it. You're not getting your own Lambda, right? So when you're a slice, you're telling it only take traffic from my VPC and my private networking. And we'll talk about that later. Like that's advanced topic, but from a security perspective, that's what you talk about companies. How are you controlling your network? Is it on the internet? Is it encrypted? And two, a lot of times is PCI, HIPAA. They tell you how they want that configured. Can you get to AWS traffic? Should it be over internet? Can it be private? Does it need to be encrypted? What compliances you're using, or you are here to tell you how you want to do that. So that's it. Me wrapping up. I'm gonna take shout out to Kev. Take that little $5, put that on my barbecue. I need to be going on a diet though, but I'm I'm gonna give me a little barbecue and hold on, Jermaine. I'm gonna do this real quick. Let's see, AWS free tier. We're gonna wrap it up. I told you, man. This up. Yep. Let's switch it. Oh. Shout out to my man. Let me see. I'll make that to Jermaine. So if you got the AWS, make this a little bigger for the old people, which is me. They have a free tier. Get free hands-on experience because they want you to get experience. So you can go out and tell people how great they're in. Like I said, I shouldn't say this on my. I ran a company on it. So I created a company on it, ran it for about a year and a half. So you get free trials. Sometimes you get free months. Sometimes they're always free. And compute, you get 750 hours of 12-month free trial with compute. Your S3, which is your file system. DynamoDB, which is a day. Shout out to Engineering Cannabis, machine learning. He's advanced. This is for me when I learned machine learning. They give you pre-built stages and stuff. Lambda, you get 1 million hits. Redshift, SNSs, you can send out emails and make web calls. So they got a ton of free stuff. Like I said, I ran a company out there. So let's see what's on the compute. EC2, which is basically their Linux. And it's like I said, I ran a company on it. It's just by like I said, my attorney, she had 10 people going out, and I created a little Apache Java database, put it on there. Lightsail. I think me and Keep It Tech was talking about Lightsail. Virtual private server made easy. Anything you need to jumpstart, it's a server already pre-built. You can just put. I was thinking about putting WordPress on there. That's what everybody does their database. So that's it. So you can check that out. Databases. So check out that free tier. The cool thing too is, and you can just try stuff. Usually I build stuff, especially when I'm first trying it out. You can build it and just use it for a day and just tear it down because you can actually get charged per hour. Right. So you build it up. So a lot of my stuff, unless I'm trying to do, sometimes I do bigger projects, but I'm labbing every day, like y'all trying to learn cloud formation and some other new techniques inside AWS. So I'll spin up a lab and do the lab and just tear it down afterwards. Long story short, I'm past the free period, so I get charged a little money. So that's wait up all this free under one. Yeah, it's all free one account. You create one account, then because in the one account, I'm gonna spin up an app server, Linux, a database, right? So a lot of that you can spin up under one account. A lot of companies do 2 accounts, so but yeah, you can spin it up. I like doing it on one account because then it's all visible. When you start doing 2 accounts, it's called cross accounts. So that means you got to give that one account permission to see the other account stuff, right? If I do it on the one account, I can put permissions on the actual service to do security and not still have to worry about cross account stuff. That's a little more advanced, buddy. I thought EC2 was no. Like I spun up Postgres. Let's see what's on the database. That's probably 10 years ago when I did that. Let's see, we got the RDS, and on the RDS, you get Postgres, MySQL, you get DynamoDB, Redshift if you're doing data warehousing. Elastic is in memory. So a lot of times if you want to speed up your database, you can put elastic memory in. Nah, man, they give you anything you're doing that I've seen that's pretty basic that most small companies are going to do, that they got the free tier. Like I said, with that one email, I think you get it for a year. Sometimes, depending on it, they give you like 750. Is that for the deal? This gives you 20 gig of data for 2 months too. Like I said, I run a small business, and I don't think I got to charge it off. It was just so small. Like say 10 people, unless you're a company, you're not gonna put 1 billion rows in the database. Now, Jermaine, so now you should be good. Like I said, ProfessorBlackOps@gmail.com. If you got any questions on that, too, just hit me up on that. Like I said, I've been really labbing hard every day. I just kind of made a commitment. I was doing AWS compliance, checking for security. I just kind of miss and build stuff. So a lot of people don't know I got my AWS practitioner certification. I got the associate architect certification, and I just got the Amazon security specialty certification. So I got those 3 certifications. So I'm grinding, like I said. Um, so getting out there, trying to get into. I've been looking forward to watching your live business. I will see how you would business. Oh yeah, definitely, and I think that's what I'm gonna talk about. Like we were talking about 3-tier. Talk about it and, like you said, do a lab and actually build it. If you actually look at one of my videos, I did an old school. Just Google on my library, AWS. I actually set up a 3-tier architecture, and I put Apache, Tomcat, and I hooked it up. I didn't spin up the database, but I was gonna spin up a Postgres database, and I actually configured it using security groups, which is their firewalls and all that. So now, Jermaine, so we definitely gonna talk about it from a architectural standpoint and a security piece of that architectural. So you'll see those videos coming in. A lot of times I think I'm gonna just do them online and just walk through the lab and do it. So once again, Professor blackops at gmail.com. Everybody have a good week. Everybody have a good weekend. The technology's out here for us. Let's get it. The bag. I've been in the game for 30 plus years. You got Gabe A, Keep It Techie, Kev Tech. There's just so many people out there. Struggle Security, Black Heights, Textual Chatter, Women in Linux. I need to give me a list when I give my shout outs. I forget anybody. Shout out to Sub-Zero. I always forget about Sub-Zero. I made my first bag in Oracle. He's in that Oracle life. I was an Oracle DBA for really an Oracle programmer DBA for 15 years. I love Oracle. Oracle's my first bag. I think, things are moving quickly, right? Different technology, but definitely a bag getter, right? I think it's a little older database, but I love me some Oracle. That was my first 6-figure job in this industry. And I was like, hey, I can make it in here. So shout out. Thank you. Happy spoken podcast. Cool. Let's see. Thanks, I appreciate that. So I'm thinking about trying to get the developer cert and the database cert. That might be too many certs, Hellman. The cool thing is, and I don't want to shortchange anybody, is I've been doing this for 30 years. So most of those terms to me, they were not new. What AWS called them new. Like they were one of their big thing is SQS, which is a queue. Oracle has queues since 1995. I've been doing Oracle queues since 1995. So to put something on an Oracle queue and pull it off with PL SQL, I've been doing that for 15, 20 years. And Amazon, they have a Lambda with their queue. So you put it in there and your Lambda take it off with Java, PHP. So when they talk about TTL and throttling, and I was like, man, I've been doing that for 15 years. So that's why one reason I've got 3 certs in 3 months. So, but once again, like I said, I've been doing this for recession-proof your life through text. Get facts. I've been interviewing because my contract's coming up. So I've been interviewing with a couple companies. So my email box has been filling up. So I was looking at Struggle Security. I was thinking about doing overwork. Give me 2 remote jobs to try to do 2 of them because I'm old and single. Don't nobody want me. I was like, I can get 2 remote jobs. But I'm like, let me settle down. So now everybody have a great weekend. Let's get it. Like I said, that's my email. You can always go to my channel and go to about. You'll see my email on there. Give me 2 days. I used to be a professor. It takes me 48 hours to get back on your emails. And a lot of times too is I might send you to somebody. Like I said, Black Heights, Textual Chatter, those guys are great with resumes and career development, right? I'm the guy that's gonna, like my man Jermaine, we're gonna talk about 3-tier architecture. We're gonna talk about routing traffic. We're gonna talk about security groups and what is a virtual firewall, right? What is a NAC firewall? What's the difference? When to use when from a security perspective, right? What is a compensating control from a security requirement? How do we make that work? So that's what we doing over here. But shout out to y'all, man. I know y'all gonna get it. I see y'all getting it, and that's the only reason. One reason I came on YouTube is to help people, especially young people. They don't see people like us. Let's get it. So, like I said, if there's anything I can do for you, just shoot me an email. And like I said, and Black Heights send people to me. Textual Chatter, Kev Tech done sent 2 or 3 people to me. So if I can do anything from that, or if I can hook you up with some resources I had. Somebody was talking about Splunk. I might get him on here. I'm cool with a Splunk engineer, and a lot of people are talking about Splunk. And Splunk makes huge money. The only negative about Splunk is only big companies have Splunk. So that's the only negative. You got to be a big company because it's expensive. I got some big clients, and they were like, "Oh no, Splunk is too expensive." Right? So, and we'll talk about that. AWS CloudWatch, AWS CloudTrail from a logging perspective. Then they have Elasticsearch. That you can take those logs and consolidate them and compress them and make them cheaper. We get that down in logging. So, oh yeah, hell man, there's a ton of Java jobs. The problem is I haven't done it in 4 or 5 years. Um, Spring and Hibernate is still hot. There's newer things out there. Folks can never sleep out now. Oracle's still hot, man. No, you're right. You get that legacy feeling. A lot of times they pay you more because a lot of people they're not learning Java. They're learning PHP, Node. What's Tam's favorite ones? Rust is super hot, right? So there's things that are hotter than that. So a lot of new kids are learning Java, right? They're learning Rust. I forgot the other one. I know Rust is a big one, but I'm out of here. I'm about to probably order me a little barbecue that I shouldn't order and get back on my lab. Shout out. Oh, people labbing too. I got this role I got to assume out of AWS from a security perspective. I don't want to have long-term credentials. So when you need to do some work, I can tell you to, they call it assume this role. It's going to give you credentials for how long you need them. Then after that, they're going to expire. So if somebody hacks your account, that role will not be available to you, and it cuts down your blast rate, right? So if somebody hacks one person, they won't get all these rights, right? That they shouldn't have. So, let's see. Splunk forced me to learn security. Yeah, Splunk, hey man. Like I said, one young lady, like I said, kept texting her to me, and I hooked her up with a Splunk engineer. Like I said, I've been in there. He was cool with it. I think he actually gave her some training credits. I think so. I might see if I can get some training credits from Splunk and get them off on my channel. Shout out to Alpha Cyber. Go check him out. He be giving out giveaways. I actually won some on his channel, and I ain't used it in a year. I'm surprised they haven't kicked me off. It was application security. I won it. I need to go check it out. I just been so busy. So yeah, I might try to give a giveaway. Yeah, exactly that legacy. COBOL guys make a ton of money because most of them dudes are deleted. So I know we do a little COBOL. We got a mainframe where I work at. So those guys get paid because those guys really don't exist. You think PL SQL guys are COBOL guys are super rare, man. Lab every day. Once again, I'm out of it. You can see me, I'm trying to go I'm hoping to go live a little more. I need to start putting out more content. I've been trying to get these AWS certs. Like I said, my contract's gonna end up, and I started interviewing. I wasn't getting kind of hits I want, and I think a lot of the HR scanning software looks for certifications at the level of jobs I was trying to get. So in the past, people know me. This is the last thing I'm saying. One of my homies I'm gonna have on my channel is executive VP or something of sales at Salesforce.com. I was getting in my second interview and they put on a hiring freeze. I'm like, man, that's the job I wanted. It's all remote. I think they pay Cali wages. I was trying to get that Salesforce money. They put the hiring freeze. So I have to get back out here. I appreciate that, brother Michael. So yeah, get them certs. But like I said, once again, I had 30 years in the game, so it made it a little easier. Like I use most of those techniques. So, and two is that's one reason I start talking about AWS too. It helps me learn. If you guys want to get those certs, we can talk about them, and I give you my 2 cents on them. They're vicious on their I'm trying for what you call it. Their scenarios. They go through scenarios. Their scenarios be rough, man. Especially the associate architect. It's not like, well, if you're doing this and this and this, then they have these little nuances. So you gotta catch the nuance. Like, okay, you got one EC2 instance. You're not running a bunch of them. So your answer is going to be different if it was one versus if it was, you spun up on a, automatic, group to expand and shrink them, right? So a lot of times I was reading it to them and I just assumed they were spinning up 10 and they'd be like, no, EC2 instance, right? So then the answer will be different. So you got to read through the questions very astutely. A lot of times I skim stuff. I be OCD, I be skimming. So I got to do better. But once again, have a nice weekend. This Monday's here. Let's get it. And like I said, we're gonna get on the cybersecurity AWS. That's kind of my my journey right now. I think it's one of the hot ones. Don't sleep on Azure. They right behind them now. And not a big Google fan, but those guys are coming up there. They got infinite money. Oracle Cloud's pretty good. They buying a ton of products. Rackspace still in there. So there's a ton. And a lot of times too, once you know one cloud, right, they're pretty similar. They just name different things, right? They got their Linux, they got their ASG to spin up and shrink Linux or Windows boxes, right? They're all the same. You're welcome, Mama. So that's it. Once again, hit me up if you need me, ProfessorBlackOps@gmail.com. You can always go to my page, go to about my emails on there. Give me 48 hours as an ex-professor. Yeah, I get 48 hours. So once again, have a great weekend, and I'm gonna see you. Be putting out more content. So definitely AWS, and I always try to do my regular news content. Check me out. Everybody have a great Sunday.